So, with a new year comes some new requirements as the United States Army is going to be changing weapons qualifications. So, let's talk about it. What's up, my friends? Welcome to this video. In this one, we're going to be talking about some changes that are going to happen during this year, during 2020. When in 2020? Not 100% sure yet. I was reading about this, so it doesn't actually mention in the Army Times when this is going to take place, but the changes that are going to be taking place this year is that the Army is going to change up how soldiers qualify with their rifle and even other weapons as well, but we're mainly going to focus on how soldiers qualify now with their M4 or their rifle and how those changes kind of affect individuals. Now, I've already did a video on actually like weapons qualification, so I won't really reiterate like how weapons qualification works for the United States Army. I'll have a little card up above that'll pop up here that you can click on if you really want to and maybe go check out that video and learn a little bit more about weapons qualification. But if you're already up to speed, well then cool, let's talk about what the changes are going to be. So the new qualification is broken up into what are called 6 tables. It's kind of just different events that soldiers will have to accomplish in order to qualify. So some different kind of portions to it. They've already had that kind of before, so I don't know if this just means that they're going to implement it a little bit better or maybe enforce it a little bit stricter, where before you were supposed to do some of this stuff, but sometimes they were kind of lenient on whether or not you did it. But the idea behind the 6 tables is that you have these preliminary marksmanship instructions, so you're kind of, getting a little bit of block of instructions, I guess, to make sure that you know the fundamentals of trigger squeeze and your aiming and your breathing and everything like that. Then you're going to have like a pre-live fire kind of simulation that you'll probably go through that could come through what is known as the EST 3000 or 2000, whatever it is, but basically it's just like a simulated weapons range where it kind of gives you a kick and it kind of allows you to kind of practice your trigger squeeze and your breathing and practice shooting at them in a simulated type of environment. You're also going to have some magazine and shooting position drills to just make sure you're familiar with all the different shooting positions and I guess maybe being able to quickly reload possibly your rifle. Then you also have some grouping and zeroing, so making sure that the sights are zeroed in so that way you can accurately hit these targets and everything. And then you also have a practice qualification before you move into the actual qualification itself. Now the story's talking about of these changes, it's mentioning that shooters are gonna have to fire at night as well as with a gas mask. And that was already a thing before, so I'm not sure if when they're mentioning this, they're referring to that it's now a requirement for qualification, where before there was times, hey, you just wanted to qualify, get the hell out of there and move on. And then sometimes if we had, some extra rounds we needed to, spend out, and get rid of, then we had to stick around for, NBC and night fire. And sometimes it just depend on a lot of different scenarios. There was a lot of times that I did do night fire and, firing with the gas mask on, but then there was also a lot of times where there's certain situations where we didn't do that. So it was kind of back and forth as far as whether you would or you wouldn't. So I don't know if this means that now it's a requirement or you have to do this portion of the qualification in order to fully go through the qualification, or if it's just kind of just adding this into it like they did before, where sometimes it happens and sometimes it won't happen. Now, one thing that is a little bit different is when soldiers before were qualifying, you had like your magazines stacked up on the side next to you to be able to quickly grab them, load them up, fire, and then you switch them out if you need be, right? When you're, usually they're different, one magazine for one kind of, iteration, and then you would switch out to the other magazine for the next iteration. Well, that is no longer gonna be the case. They're gonna be more kind of basically realistic to a combat environment, and you have to actually have your magazines on you. So if you're wearing the vest, then you have it inside your vest or pouches or however you have your kind of setup, I guess, then the magazines are gonna have to be in there as if they would be when you're in a combat environment, and you're gonna have to actually pull the magazines out of those pouches to load them into your weapon that way. No just sticking them off to the side conveniently within arm's reach to easily be able to grab to. They need to be on you like you would in a combat environment. Also, a thing that they're getting rid of is what was called alibi fires. So is what that meant was you would have maybe the first iteration of targets coming up and everything. After that was cleared, they would ask, on the range, was there any alibis? So if you had like a jam where the round got jammed inside your weapon or something along those lines, some kind of malfunction or whatever, then they would allow you to go ahead and fire off that round, and they would pop the targets back up and they'd go through them. If you had 1 or 2 rounds or something like that you still had because your weapon jammed, then you could fire off those rounds and get an alibi fire. Well, they're getting rid of that. So if you have a malfunction, you just need to respond to that malfunction and continue firing. If you are not able to fire at the targets because you weren't able to react fast enough to that malfunction, then you're just tough out. You know, you don't get to, you know, get a chance to refire those targets. You're just out those specific targets, I guess. Other things they're adding is they're also adding a standing position. Before you just had the prone and the kneeling position. Now they're adding the standing position into it as well. So that would be an additional thing. But also the targets aren't going to be up for as long as they used to be. So they may stay up. I don't remember the exact exposure time as far as the targets, but if say, you know, they used to be 30 seconds, maybe now they're dropping down to 20 or 10. So they're shortening it. They didn't say specifically how much they're shortening it by, but it is definitely shortening it to where the targets are not going to be up for as long before they're going to fall down if you don't shoot them down. Obviously, if you hit them, they fall down, but if you miss the target, then it automatically, after a certain amount of time, falls down on its own. That doesn't mean that you got that target. That just means now you can't shoot at that target. It only registers hits. If you don't hit the target, then eventually it falls down and then just doesn't count as a hit. Now the qualifications for like marksman, sharpshooter, and expert are still the same as far as the amount of targets you have to hit, but there are some little caveats to this that make it a little bit more challenging to individuals than it was before. So it's still the same. You have to hit at least 23 targets out of 40 to be able to qualify out of it. And you're still going to have the 23 to 29 for marksmanship. You still have the 30 to 35 for sharpshooter, and then the 36 to 40 for expert. But there are some additional requirements for sharpshooter and expert. Before you had individuals that, you know, they know that, hey, I have a 20 round magazine. I know that I have this many targets that are going to be coming up during, you know, this iteration. There's some that are pretty far out there. You have the 300 meter targets. And for some people, they would just save that ammo and maybe say if they knew that there was 2 300 meter targets, they would just not fire at those 2 300 meter targets and save those 2 extra rounds, so that way if they missed one of the other targets, they knew they had an extra round to be able to utilize to try to hit that target and hopefully get that hit. That is no longer going to be a thing, as now they're going to have to be required to hit some of the 250 meter targets and the 300 meter targets depending on what you're after. So that's going to require a soldier to at least hit 1 of the 5 300 meter targets in order to qualify for expert. If they were able to, you know, reach that score and they didn't shoot at any of the 300 meter targets, that doesn't qualify them for expert then. So they have to at least get 1 of those 5 300 meter targets if they're going to shoot for expert, and they're going to get that range of 36 to 40 targets to actually qualify for expert, but 1 of those targets has to have been the 300 meter one. And then for sharpshooter, they have to at least get 1 of the 250 meter targets or 1 of the 300 meter targets to qualify in there. If they just shoot at all the closer targets or whatever, then it's not going to count for sharpshooter if 1 of those targets was not at least a 250 meter target. So some of this stuff, you know, makes it just more combat effective. You know, having the magazines on the vest compared to just conveniently located right next to you, the standing position being added into there to make sure you can, you know, fire from a standing position effectively, and then even adding in there that, you know, now you do have to at least hit 1 of those 300 meter targets if you want to qualify for expert. Otherwise, if you're just hitting these closer up targets but still making the score limit that you need for expert, well, that's not going to count. So I definitely think these are some good changes they're adding to it. Nothing that makes it too complicated, but definitely makes it more realistic to a combat scenario and makes it, you know, kind of a better test for a soldier to, you know, prove that they are efficient with their personal rifle. So what do you guys think out there? Do you think that these are good changes to make it more kind of realistic to a combat scenario, or do you think these are just unnecessary changes and the previous version was just fine? Whether you're not in the Army or maybe currently in the Army or veterans, whichever, I would love to hear your guys' opinions. Leave the comments down below. Do you like these changes, or do you think they're unnecessary? If you enjoy this type of content and you're not already subscribed to the Chaos Army, maybe think about hitting that subscribe button. Even think about clicking on that bell to get alerts as soon as new videos go live, to include the live streams and become a part of the awesome notification platoon. Check out the links down in the description. Also make sure to follow me on Instagram. I love to hear from you guys. You can message me, ask questions. That's cool. Thanks so much for watching. I'm ThatChrisChaos, and I will see you next time. See ya.